A widow drags a wounded thief from the storm. By dawn, her choice could save a town or doom it. Thunder rolls over the flats as rain needles the schoolyard. Eliza Hart sees the rider only when his horse strikes the bellpost and staggers. He slips into the mud. She moves before fear can bark. Shawl over hair, boots in the clay, she drags him through the schoolhouse door. The room gives with groans. She drops the bar, lowers the lantern. His coat is soaked and black with blood high on the shoulder. She cuts it away with sewing shears. A pocket Bible falls, then a pressed violet uncrushed. She sets both by the flame. The wound is ugly. Not mortal yet, mortal by morning if neglected. She heats water on the iron stove, mixes willow with lard, rinses grit, and stitches in quick, neat bites. When she rolls him, her fingers cross a bad-shaped scar pale against old sun. A man who once wore the law and laid it down. He does not wake. She tucks his coat against the sill to stop the draft and slides the Bible near the heat. The bell rope claps the rafters. She will not ring now. Hoofbeats slide through rain. Voices at the door. "Evening, Miss Hart." She steadies her breath, slides the man beneath the chalkboard stage, drops the curtain, and takes up the slate pointer. She opens a hand's width. Lantern light spills across slickers and a damp notice. The deputy slaps it on her plank. "Wanted, Silas March. Reward paid in silver. You seen him?" he asks. "I've seen Rain and Readers," she answers, and lets the door narrow. They tramp off to the sheds. She bolts the bar and lets her hands shake. When hoofbeats fade, she drags his saddlebag in from the step. The leather is stamped with a small cross. Inside, wrapped in altar linen, lie rolls of silver banded in twine. Between them, a ledger scrap lists names and numbers in a careful hand. Not loot, tithe. Shame pricks her for naming him an outlaw before she knew the thief's shape. She rewraps the silver and sets it on the desk beside the bell. The metal chills through cloth into her palm until her skin understands weight. The man stirs. Gray eyes open, pain clear. He looks from the lantern to Violet to her face, taking stock without speech. "You were shot," she says. "You'll keep the arm if you keep still." He tries a word and fails. He gestures for a slate. With his left hand, he writes, "Thank you." Wind shoves at the eaves. The stray school dog, a gray thing the children call Slate, scratches. She lets him in. He curls by the stove. The man slides a hand toward him. Slate accepts and stays. Eliza warms milk, crumbles hardtack, and feeds him 3 careful spoons. She rinses his brow with vinegar, loosens the bandage, and slides a folded page beneath so the cloth will not stick. The torn word on the scrap reads, "Mercy. How far?" She asks. He taps the window, then the bar, writes, "Riders near." "Then we stay quiet," she says. They wait through the worst of the storm. He sleeps and wakes in small loops, always checking the window and the Bible. Near midnight, the bar jumps under a testing knuckle. Slate rumbles. She sets her ear to the seam. Only wind, only the rope clapping a tired rhythm. She places the silver beside the violet on the shelf, ordinary things guarding each other. Dawn seeps in gray. Fever breaks to a light sweat. When he can stand, she braces him to the bench. He writes his name left-handed. "Silas." "Eliza," she says back. He draws a cross and 3 short lines like wheat, then the word foreman. Another follows, hard and neat. Bragg, await lands. Bragg owns crews on the river road and buys the judge's supper. Eliza understands the ledger now, the underpaid widows, the light-touch totals. Hoofbeats return, slower, surer. A knock. "Morning, Miss Hart," the deputy calls. "Storms put folks in bad habits. May we look at your warm roof?" Eliza sets the bell on the sill, opens a narrow welcome, pours coffee into the deputy's hand and lets a splash hit his knuckles by accident. He smiles without liking it. His eyes catch the tied rope, the true hinge, the neat room. Someone stayed up making order. "We'll be back at noon with notices," he says. "Town needs one song." When they move off, she breathes again. She unwraps a coin and sees the church stamp, cross and wheat, promise struck into metal. She presses it to Violet's pedal and feels the cold spread. The clock ticks toward morning. She returns the coin to the linen, binds the silver to her middle beneath her shawl, and knots it firmly. "At dawn," she says, "we take this back to the altar. Then I'll walk you to the judge myself." Hoofbeats gather on the road like weather finding its edge. Slate lifts his head. Fists pound the door and rattle the star she keeps. Her hand rests on the silver. Choosing who gets it decides who she becomes next. Rain softened to a steady hiss, the kind that hides footsteps if you time your breaths. Eliza checked the knot at her waist, altar linen bound beneath her shawl, then lifted the bar with slow hands. Slate knows the threshold. Silas rose carefully, bracing with his left hand, keeping the wound tight to his ribs. "We use the cottonwoods," she said. "Low ground, no silhouettes," he nodded. The pocket Bible rode his coat like a quiet order. He tucked the pressed violet into an inner seam where it could neither boast nor break. They slipped into dawn. The yard smelled of wet clay and trampled grass. Puddles held torn clouds. Eliza stepped first, planting her heels softly so water swallowed the marks. Silas followed close enough to borrow her track. Slate ranged ahead in a figure 8, scattering his scent. At the fence, she made a decoy tail, broom bristle pressed as a boot toe. Quill scratches for a lame spur, a shallow skip that said a man favored his right. The false line led east, away from the cottonwoods, toward flats where riders like to feel tall. She brushed their real prints with willow. The cottonwoods received them with cool hands. They followed a deer path that kept to the shadow and low sedge. The river muttered left. Silas steadied himself on trunks, stepping where Eliza pointed. Twice he paused to listen for absence. No jingle. No crow cut by hoof noise. Habits of a man who had learned the cost of being right a heartbeat too late. On the last rise before the church, Eliza touched his sleeve. "Let me carry the air," she whispered, and went ahead alone. The church sat plain as bread, white boards rinsed by rain, door propped with the old river stone. No horses, no pipe smoke. Only bees in a porch seam. She lifted a hand. Silas came on, jaw set to swallow pain. Inside, cool and beeswax. Pastor Reed stacked seed jars. He took them in with one sweep. Wound, wait, will. 2 minutes, Eliza said. No speeches. Reed nodded and shut the door. Eliza untied her shawl, unbuckled the oilskin wrap, and laid the linen parcel on the Lord's table. Silas set the Bible beside it and slid the ledger corner into the open page so figures met Scripture like proof-finding promise. "Lock box," Eliza said. Reed fetched the iron cash box and 2 keys, one from his neck, one from his sleeve hem. Eliza peeled back the linen for the wheat stamp to show. Reed did not touch the coins. He received their witness. He laid altar linen beneath, lowered the rolls and the torn corner, and folded one more square on top. The locks turned and spoke in small thunder. A hoof clacked in the road. Reed looped the bell rope once around a nail so zeal wouldn't betray them. Eliza eased the side door a hand's width. River air slipped in, smelling of silt and new starts. "We go back by the same shadow," she said. "If anyone asks, you were counting jars." "I was," Reed said. "And debts." They slipped out. The cottonwoods admitted them again. Slate angled wide to check the road, then returned. Eliza combed willow across their rise to soften the sign. Where mud held stubborn, she pressed bristles to sketch a lie that marched east. Back at the yard, the world had woken. A milk wagon bumped toward the church. Two boys jogged after. At the fence, a brag rider studied the ground, certain he could read it all. Eliza offered a story that wanted to be read wrong and walked on steadily, shawl neat. Silas let his left shoulder lead and kept his right close, just another tired man at a school before breakfast. Inside, warmth gathered. Eliza set the bar, set the kettle, and let herself breathe. Slate collapsed on the mat with a grunt that released the hour. Silas wrote on a slate, letters thin but certain. Safe? For now, she said. Safe is a moving wagon. We keep pace. She checked his bandage, clean, skin angry in the right way, and slid a fresh folded scrap under the edge. The torn word there said mercy again, as if the primer insisted on one lesson until it took. Eat, she added, and poured him porridge thinned with milk. Then took a spoon so he wouldn't ration Hope. He finished and pointed to the hinge, then the bell rope. Good, he said, the first clear word. It sounded like a nail-driven true. Plan A holds, Eliza answered. Plan B waits. She set the tarnished deputy star on the shelf beside the violet, the pebble, and the little leather heart she kept ready for a boy's next lost button. And the hour keeps its habit. The clock above the door clicked toward 9. Somewhere in town, paper was being tacked to wood. Somewhere else, a conscience looked away and called it sense. Eliza faced the big board and began laying out the sums that would keep small minds steady until the noon bell tried to teach the town another kind of arithmetic today. Dawn seeped slowly and gray, lifting the room out of lantern time. Eliza wiped fog from the panes so the glass would not flash like a signal. Slate snored in a curled comma by the stove. She checked Silas's brow. Cooler. The fever had turned and walked on. She loosened the bandage, breathed, and bound it again, firm but kind. A clean scrap slid under the edge so the cloth would not stick. The printed word on it, mercy, showed like a quiet order. Another hour, she said. Then we try standing properly. Silas nodded. His eyes made their usual circuit, door bar, window slit Bible, and came back to her face. He drank, then handed the cup back. Work steadied the air. Eliza woke the coals, set oats to simmer, and threaded a needle through a boy's torn suspenders. Mending small things made big choices bearable. Silas watched her hands, then reached for the slate and wrote, left-handed, "Show me what needs fixing." She led him to the window. "This blanket flaps when the wind turns." He teased twine through 2 slate pencils, stitched the hem to the casing, and kept his shoulder close. When it held, he rested because bodies run on limits, not pride. She brought porridge, ate first to show it was safe, and passed him the spoon. He finished and saved a thumb's worth for Slate, who accepted and went back to guard. A soft knock at the rear step. Eliza lifted the bar a finger. Prissy Hobbs stood there. Ma says, "Warm roof, warm words," Prissy whispered. "Pastor's door is open. Women are counting seeds. Deputy's men posted a new notice. They'll sweep roofs by noon." Eliza handed her a folded sheet written before dawn. "Tell Pastor the silver sits locked. Keep doors open. Protect names." Prissy tucked it under her ribbon and slipped away through the cottonwoods. Back at the bench, Silas had opened his pocket Bible to the flyleaf. With his left hand, he drew 3 short strokes like wheat and a cross above, then wrote one small name, Ada. He tapped the ledger corner in the Bible and then the drawing. "You know who is owed," Eliza said. He wrote 2 more, Cobb, Nanyahi. Then he shut the Bible to keep the names from careless air. Light sharpened. Tracks would start telling. Eliza took the broom and swept slowly, not to clean, but to lift footprints into one smudge that said 1 person moving, not 2. She shook dust into the stove and listened to it vanish. Slate escorted a hen out. The goat bawled. The lean-to hinge squealed back. Small alarms wired to the day. Silas wrote, "You could have rung the bell." Eliza set the bell on the sill. "Ringing brings many kinds of help," she said. "Last night I only needed one." He studied her, then wrote, "When this is done, teach me the bell code." She leaned close. 2 taps, a neighbor. 3, the deputy. "Hold and let go, Weather." 1 sharp and a pause. The child hurt. "Long pull fire." She hesitated. 1 tap, then your name if I can't use my voice. He absorbed it face still, as if adding lines to a private map. The clock ticked toward 8. Eliza set out slates, wrote sums on the big board, 7x9, 12 3, 24, 17, and added a small line above them. "Open thy mouth, judge righteously. Children soon," she said. Silas wrote, "I can sit quietly." "You can sit like a man who belongs in a room," she said. "That's quiet enough." They practiced the few steps from the cot to the bench and back. He moved slowly. She let him keep the pace. On the 3rd pass, his knee buckled. She caught him without noise. Footsteps pattered outside. Eliza rang the bell once. Children arrived in little knots. Ada Finch came with her boys. Mrs. Cobb with a tin pail. Nanyehi with a loaf. They took in Silas the way plains folk take in weather, measured without gossip where children can borrow it. "Slates out," Eliza said. Chalk began to speak. She circled the room, writing books, touching shoulders, making the world square. Silas lifted fallen pencils, squared readers, and steadied the wobbling globe before it rattled off. He said nothing. He mended by being careful. A button popped from a boy's suspenders. Eliza reached for a needle and thread. Silas trimmed a sliver of leather with his knife, cut a neat slot, and set it on the desk. A plain heart, small as a coin, built to hold. Eliza threaded it, sewed swiftly, and tugged the string. It held. Outside, a hammer tapped at the hotel post. The paper took nails. Noon began to look like a number you could write down. Eliza rolled her shoulders, eased her shawl, and rested her palm on the bell rope without pulling. She looked at the violet, the tarnished star, the Bible, and the leather heart, and let those 4 objects sort her purpose. "We will do our lessons," she said to the room and to herself. "And when the hour comes, we keep our promise." By 9, the light had the edge that shows where mud ends and dust begins. The schoolroom filled with the hum of chalk. Eliza let that hum build a wall while her mind laid out the hour. Desks formed a narrow lane from the door to the stove. The blanket at the window was stitched tight. The hinge sat true. The bell rope knot held fast. "Copy your 9s," she said. Then Proverbs neat. She moved past Silas at the bench. He looked like any hired man waiting for word on a load, hatless, left hand quiet on his knee. Only the set of his jaw told the cost of sitting upright. Slate sprawled by his boot and pretended to sleep while keeping count of the feet outside. Prissy slipped from the doorpost where she'd been watching. "Deputies at the square. Poster as big as a door. Coulter reads at noon." "Thank you," Eliza said. "Erase the board if anyone stares in." Prissy twirled the eraser and took station by the bell rope. Ada Finch's youngest mouthed his tables and watched the rope as if it were a tame snake. A wagon rattled toward the church. Women drifted that way in twos, baskets under shawls. Men hovered at corners. Eliza poured 2 tin cups. She handed one to Silas. He sipped and nodded once. Enough. She drank the other. "Miss Hart?" Mrs. Cobb whispered. "If you need an extra hinge for courage, I got one." She slipped a small iron strap from her pocket. "Left over from my Eli." Eliza curled the cool metal into her palm. "I'll use it. Footfalls on the step." 2 men's shadows crossed the blanket seam. The door lifted under a courteous knuckle. Eliza laid the extra hinge on the desk beside the violet, the tarnished star, the Bible, and the leather heart. She breathed once and raised the bar 2 inches. Deputy Coulter's hat framed the noon blue behind him. 2 brag riders stood in the yard with the posture of men who think staring is a tool. Coulter's smile held. "Children in? Good. We'll post notice here, too." "School is not a post," Eliza said. "It's a room where words learn to be true." He unrolled the paper. "Silas March, read it at the square," she said. Pastors ringing in witness. As if on cue, the church bell gave one careful note. Heads turned that way. Coulter nodded. "After we check warm roofs." He leaned, gaze ticking across the desks, the lane, the stitched blanket. "Your hinge sits better than mine." "I was taught to trust what sags," she said. "We'll look at your lean-to and understage. Mind the goat." She opened the door the width propriety allowed. Body still agate. 2 riders peeled toward the shed. The hinge screamed. Children glanced up. Prissy made a show of erasing, chalk dust rising like fog. Coulter set 1 boot inside, just enough to lay claim. His heel found the squeak Eliza had left in the floorboard as a warning. "You keep tidy," he said softly. "Tidy women often hide messy loyalties." "I keep children from tripping," she replied. His gaze drifted to the shelf, the star beside the Bible, the violet between readers, the leather heart tied with ribbon. He turned instead to Silas. "You, name?" Silas lifted the slate and wrote, "Thomas Clay." Coulter smiled without showing teeth. "Mr. Clay, you look poorly." "Fell," Silas said. "Storm does that," Coulter answered. He looked back at Eliza. "At noon, we'll want eyes at the church." "You'll bring your class." "They'll copy Proverbs," she said. "I'll come with my voice." The riders returned with goat hair on their cuffs and nothing in their hands but irritation. One hooked a thumb toward the stage. "Under there?" "Children read there," Eliza said. "You step on it and you'll answer to mothers." Coulter's amusement deepened. "We'll come back," he said. He tapped the bell's brass handle twice. 1 for neighbor, 2 for deputy. He left the door open a beat longer than courtesy. Morning poured in. Eliza closed it and set the bar. Silence reclaimed the room. She turned to the children. "Recess in place," she said. "Stretch fingers. Breathe." She moved down the line, straightening slates, rubbing a smudge from one boy's cheek with her thumb. Silas's breath shortened. Sweat beaded his temple. Eliza lifted the cup. "Another swallow," he obeyed. He slid the slate toward her and wrote noon, plan. She touched each object as she named the parts. "A, I stand at the door. You take the crooked path to the river road where the judge can see you arrive. B, if riders block, I fire once to turn heads and claim law with my mouth." He wrote, "Ledger?" "Locked under God." He tapped the leather heart, then the star. "Hold," he said. "Hold," she echoed. The clock hand stepped toward the top. Outside, wheels rattled toward the church. The town drew breath like a congregation before a hymn. Eliza took her place at the doorway, 1 palm on wood, 1 on the bell rope, and felt the room gather behind her. The hour leaned forward like a rider rising. Eliza felt it in the boards, in the way Slate rose and set his paws down without sound. She checked the drawer, 1 revolver with 1 honest round. She slid it into her skirt pocket, muzzle down. The bell rope lay warm under her palm. "Copy the proverb once more," she said. "Neat as winter rose." Children bent their heads. Prissy took the doorpost, eraser ready. Silas eased to standing, tested his breath, and nodded. He could walk the first yards of the crooked road when it was time. Eliza slid the extra hinge into her apron like a talisman that remembered work. Hoofbeats pressed the mud into memory. Voices gathered by the square, a reader calling a notice, a scoff, boots arranging themselves into a kind of law. Recess, Eliza said. Counting game. Lines of 2. Quiet feet. Children filed through the back, circled, and returned, learning the lane between desks without seeing the defense in it. She placed Ada's boys by the lean-to so the hinge squeak would sound like play. She sent Prissy to the window slit to watch the dust. She gave Mrs. Cobb the coffee pot and a look that said, "Pour too slow, a man's hands." She set the tarnished star beside the violet and the leather heart. Order, mercy, hold. Silas wrote on the slate, "Now?" "On my bell," she said. "Go to the cut bank, crawl the creek. Keep low until the road bends. When you see the judge's flag, stand and show your hands." He nodded. He touched the Bible, then the violet. Boots thumped the step. Coulter's knuckles found a polite rhythm. Behind him, Bragg's riders fanned like spokes. Noon burned clean overhead. Eliza raised the bar a palm's width. "Children are in the lesson," she said. "Say what you came to say." Coulter unrolled a poster and tapped it straight. "By order of Judge Harlan, reward for Silas March. Aiders will answer as aiders. We'll search warm roofs." "Our roof is working," Eliza said. "Your words belong at the church." He studied her, then the room. His men shifted, eager to be useful. "Step aside, Miss Hart," Coulter said. She shook her head. "Children first." The standoff took a breath. Slate rose to his elbows. Silas's left hand settled on the bench back. Across the flats, the church bell rang one note. Eliza moved. She swung the door wide, stepped into the yard, and let the light show empty hands. Then she palmed the bell on the sill and rang it once, sharp. Mothers gathered children. The room quieted. "Recess," she called. "Out and back 3 times round the shed." Children streamed past, laughter hiding the split plan. The hinge screamed the alarm she wanted. The yard became a wheel whose spokes blocked sight into the room. Coulter watched the wheel turn. "Don't be foolish," he said. Eliza lifted the revolver and pointed at the sky. "One shot," she said. "Only to call attention." She fired. Sound rose and fell over every hat. Heads turned. Silas slipped through the lane, out the back, and into cottonwood shadow. Slate ghosted left to drag a rider's eye. Prissy stumbled to delay another. "Enough!" Eliza said into the ringing air. "If you want justice, walk to the church and put your name to it." Bragg pushed forward, smile stiff. "You've hit a thief," he said. "You arranged what the town was meant to remember," she said. "The ledger will argue." Coulter raised a hand. His riders checked their horses and temper. "To the church," he said. Then lower, "If he appears there, this ends with words. If he runs, it ends another way." "He'll appear," she said. The wheel slowed, then flowed back inside. Eliza stood in the doorway, wrist humming with recoil. Smoke thinned. Coulter gathered his men and moved toward the bell. Eliza set the revolver on the desk and let empty chambers show. Bluff and truth had traded and come even. Mrs. Cobb exhaled. "Lord," she said and poured coffee. Prissy whispered, "He's in the cottonwoods," walking like a man about to stand taller. Eliza touched the leather heart, then the star, then the violet. "Copy line 2, she told the room. "Wisdom is justified of her children." They bent to it, pencils scratching. In the trees, Silas crawled the creek course, left hand on roots, breath measured. He felt the single shot and knew the moment had been purchased. At the bend, he saw the road, the judge's flag in the shy wind, and the dust Coulter's party through. He pressed his palm into mud and swore honesty to the stain it left. He rose when the distance was right. Back at the school, Eliza set the bell square and counted the children twice. Her mind walked beside a man she had sent into open ground with nothing but a name, a Bible, and a promise. Slates down, she said softly. Hands to laps. Breathe like soup. Outside, Noon stepped onto the stage, and Justice took its place beside it, eyes on the road. Silas reached the river road and stood where dust lifts slowly. He raised both hands, left steady, right bound. The judge's flag hung at the way station porch. A rider burst from the cottonwoods, pistol half out. Silas did not flinch. I'm here, he called. To the judge. At the school, Eliza counted heads, set the bell straight, and stepped into the yard. Lessons resume, she told the mothers. Coulter's party angled toward the church, then split. 2 along the river road, 2 around the hotel. The bell rang once, then again, Pastor Reed calling a weighing. Silas held where the road met the light. Deputy Coulter reached him at a canter and swung down, putting his horse between Silas and a hothead. Holster, he told the rider. The man obeyed. Coulter counted wounds and resolved. You surrender to the court? I do. Then you live to speak. He touched Silas's elbow. Guiding, not grabbing, inside the school. Eliza wrote across the top rail, slow so her hands would stop humming, Wisdom is justified of her children. She thought of the ledger under altar linen and the women counting seed, and breathed once for every name. At the churchyard, Reed stood by the door. The iron box waited under the altar. Judge Harlan arrived. Name, he said, Silas March. Charge is theft of tithe silver. What say you? I took what a foreman skimmed. I brought it back. Proof? Reed brought the box, turned both keys, and lifted the lid. Rolls of church-marked silver lay neat. Eliza stepped to the threshold. There's a ledger corner that kisses the wound it was torn from. Harlan held out his palm. Reed set the scrap there. Columns and names lined up true. At the top, a practiced hand had signed B. Bragg. A murmur rose. Bragg shouldered through. A thief's arithmetic, he said. You pit scraps and sentiment against pay. Count with us, Eliza said. Coulter inclined his head. We're in a house built for counting what men owe. Harlan weighed a coin, turned the wheat stamp to the light. He looked at the town. Ada Finch? She lifted her chin. Mrs. Cobb? A nod. Nanyehi? Yes. Shorted? They answered without loudness. A rider's hand ghosted toward his grip. Slate, who had slipped from the school and lay himself inside the pews, rumbled a warning. Bring your book, Harlan said to Bragg. If corners are missing, we mend truth with this piece, then sew you to your entries. A gust smeared dust across the windows. Clouds built over the cutbanks. Light went pewter. Noon dulled. Eliza kept the place she had chosen, left of the door, shoulder to the frame, eyes on altar and yard. She slipped the extra hinge into her pocket, a small weight saying, Hold. Bragg laughed without joy. You set townsfolk to sing while you launder theft with hymns. Coulter's patience thinned. You set hunger to humming while you posted notices. Harlan raised one finger. The room stilled. Today's arithmetic, he said. Silver Stays Church. Bragg held the pending ledger. Silas March remanded. Mercy wait if grain reaches widows by dawn. Anyone who draws iron under this roof tastes jail. A stone clacked on the step. A voice spat, Hang the thief! Reed's bell rope twitched, but he did not pull. He looked to Eliza. She stepped forward one pace. He walked here, she said, level as a chalk line. He bled without taking a penny. Throw again, and you throw at bread in your neighbor's mouth. The second stone died in a palm that thought better. Thunder muttered upriver. Rain penciled the flats. Harlan pointed to the way station. We'll shelter there. Files, ink, witness door. He took the box and shut it. Coulter, walk him! They crossed the yard as the storm gathered breath. Slate ranged. Eliza moved with them. Inside the way station office, Harlan set the box on a scarred table. Coulter closed the shutters against the first spit of rain. Reed stood with the bell rope coiled. Eliza wrung water from her shawl and rolled her sleeves. "Speak short," Harlan said to Silas. Silas told it in fence post lines. The tally he had kept as a hand, the order to look away, the corners torn, the wheat skimmed, the ride in the storm, the school door, the altar. "Where's the book?" Harlan asked. Silas drew a square. "Behind the hotel portrait." "Right hinge loose." Coulter was already moving, raincoat swinging. Eliza set gauze and vinegar on the table. "Hold still," she said, and washed the blood stripe at Silas's temple. Outside, the town shifted to storm footing. Ropes tightened, tarps pulled, yet people kept their places. The bell did not ring. Eliza knotted the bandage, then set her palm on Silas's wrist. His pulse worked like a small bell, trying not to be proud. "Stay," she said. "Here," he answered. Wind thumped the shutters. Coulter returned with a ledger thick as a family Bible and the portrait hinge in his pocket. He set the book beside the torn corner. Numbers met numbers. The seam took. Outside, thunder wrote its line. Inside, Harlan's pen wrote his verdict. Thunder thundered down the river and rattled the shutters. Judge Harlan didn't flinch. He set his palm on the ledger Deputy Coulter had pried from behind the hotel portrait and fitted the torn corner until the inked lines kissed. "This matches," he said. "Bragg is held for skimming tithe pending review. The silver returns to the church now. Mercy for Silas March will be weighed against wagons that reach the widows by first light." He looked to Eliza. "Can you swear to the chain of the silver?" "I can," she said. Reed looped the bell rope around his wrist. Rain counted on the roof. Across the yard, Bragg growled orders at riders under the eaves. Two peeled toward the river road, coin-proud and storm-stupid. Eliza felt the room tip toward trouble. "If wagons are the price of mercy," she said, "set a clock and hands to turn it." Coulter was already moving. "Two teams to the upper storehouses," he told a deputy. "Badge on the lead wagon." Silas sat straight. Harlan said, "You're remanded, not bound. Sit and breathe. Speak if someone lies. A boot scraped." Bragg pushed into the doorway with two men. "Judge, you're letting sentiment set law. That coin belongs to my accounts." Harlan didn't rise. "Your accounts will be read against the church stamp and these names. Reach for that box, and you'll wait the storm in irons." Bragg's eyes slid to Silas, then to Eliza. "Schoolmarm thinks her bell rings louder than a man's reputation." Eliza met him flat. "My bell rings for hungry mouths. Yours for your purse." Coulter blocked the door, water trickling from his brim. "Out!" Bragg left. Lightning tore the cloud. The world brightened for a breath. In that bright heart, a rider broke from Bragg's knot, galloping the church road with a lariat lifted. "Down!" Eliza snapped. She slammed the shutter between Silas and daylight. The loop slapped the plank. Slate lunged, teeth in rope, ripping the throw aside. The rider wheeled into Coulter's pistol. "Dismount," the deputy said. The man obeyed. "Next stunt earns a cell." Harlan lifted a brow at Bragg. "Your influence is showing." "Loose reins in weather," Bragg said. Reed gave the bell rope one pull. Sound rolled across the flats. Doors opened. Faces showed. Witness sprouted like wheat. "Back to paper," Harlan said. "Pastor, return the silver to the altar." "Deputy escort." "Miss Hart, you and Mr. March stay with me until the street remembers itself." They crossed the yard, the iron box between Reed and Coulter, Eliza half a step ahead of Silas. So trouble met her first. Bragg trailed the edge, counting the town. Inside the church, Reed set the box under the altar, laid linen, and turned both keys. "It is home," he said. "The storm's back broke." rain-thin to strings. Men who'd hoped for a hanging had wet hats and a hymn behind their teeth. Harlan returned to the way station desk and wrote a short order, silver under church custody. Bragg held for inquiry. Silas remanded to deputies' watch. Grain due by dawn. He sanded, blew, folded, and handed copies to Reed and Coulter. Eliza let the ink settle. Silas watched the bell rope and the pews polished by grief. His eyes looked like a place a cup might be set without fear. She thought of the violet and the leather heart by the star. "Post 2 men at the school," Harlan said. "If trouble spills, it will spill there first." "Steady ones," Coulter answered. They stepped into a sky thinking of blue. Wagons creaked from the north, bands shining wet. Ada, Finch's boys, rode the tailboard, faces fierce with hope. Bragg planted himself mid-street. "This town makes thieves into saints," he called. "You'll starve when the show's over," Eliza faced him. "We'll eat because the silver went home and the book you kept forgot to lie straight." Laughter moved like wind through grass, nervous, real. Bragg's jaw worked. His riders looked less sure of noon. At the school door, Coulter dragged a chair beside the hinge and sat. "Any man who tests this door," he told the street, "speaks to me first." "Then we'll both hear him," Eliza said and lifted the bar. Inside, the room brightened. She set the star and the leather heart together on the shelf and breathed. Children trickled back with their others. Slate curled by the threshold like a gray bar laid by love. Eliza rang the bell once. "Tables," she said. Chalk began to whisper. Silas eased to the bench, left hand steady, right bound. His gaze traveled the room. Knot, violet, star, map. He looked at Eliza last. Something in his face said the hour had chosen its shape, and he would wear it. From the north, the first wagon passed the window, piled with sacks. Women drifted after. The storm lifted. A meadowlark tried a note and kept it. Eliza wrote across the top rail, "Wisdom is justified of her children." She set the chalk down and spoke low so only Silas could hear. "Mercy keeps time," she said. "We keep pace with it." He nodded. "I will." Dusk slid in, smoothing the flats. The storm had gone east, leaving puddles with pieces of sky. Eliza rang the bell twice, neighbor, then once, hold. So mothers stayed close but didn't crowd. Coulter sat by the schoolhouse hinge, chair tipped, hat low. "We've got till dark to make this clean," he said. "We'll make it clear," Eliza answered. She chalked a grid on the big board, school, church, river road, cut bank, and wrote the bell code. Children mouthed it like a verse. Pastor Reed stepped in with rain creases on his sleeves. "2 wagons have passed Ada's, another's at Nanyehi's. We'll be near dawn, putting the last sack where names sit." "Bragg won't let the clock run quiet," Coulter said. "Riders are angling for the bridge." Eliza pictured the plank span and a torch. "Then we don't use a bridge men can steal with a match." She tapped the crooked path. "We use the ford and silence." Silas rose from the bench, left hand on the desk. "I can walk the cut bank. You can guide," Coulter allowed. "You don't pull." A boy peered through the slit. "Riders," he whispered. 4, maybe 5. Eliza turned to the shelf. Violet, Bible, star, leather heart. She tied the leather heart to the bell rope with Prissy's ribbon, a marker anyone could read in a storm. "Signals mean what we say," she told the room. "Tonight we say them truthful." Mrs. Cobb slipped in with an iron pan and a sack of pine knots. "Light and smoke without heat," she said. "False fires," Eliza said. "Put them on the east rise. Make riders think the wagons sleep there." Reed nodded. "I'll set lanterns along the wrong road. Men to shift them when hooves get near." Coulter stood. "I'll take 2 hands to the ford and walk the first team by feel." March, you walk the cutbank. Hart, you hold this door. Plan B, Eliza said. One shot if needed, then mouth and witness. No heroics, Coulter said. Only work. They moved. Mothers gathered their children. Prissy tied her ribbon, took the eraser, and stood bell guard. Across the flats, horsemen showed as dark commas. They split, 2 toward the bridge, 3 angling for school and church. Eliza left the door open the width of hospitality and placed the bell on the sill, handle forward. Evening, Miss Hart, the first rider said. Seen wagons? Seen a sky thinking kindly of grain, she said. He snorted and rode on. The second lingered, eyes on the bar, tied rope, straight desks. You favor order. It keeps little feet from harm, she said. False fire flared on the east rise. Mrs. Cobb's pan and knots are sending smoke. Riders wheeled toward it. Far off, Reed's lantern line shifted. 1, 2, 3. Coulter ghosted past with 2 men and vanished into cottonwoods. Silas left by the back, shadow to brush, bad shoulder close. The cutbank took him like kin. He placed feet where roots remembered him. At the ford, he lifted a hand to Coulter and pointed, Here! The first wagon rolled. Wheels found gravel. Men walked with their hands on spokes. Back at the school, Eliza kept the room breathing. Copy it, she told the children. Open thy mouth. Plead the cause. The bell rope touched the leather heart and stilled. She drew the deputy star flat with her palm and left it beside the Bible. Hooves hammered from the east, riders circling the false camp with curses. One peeled away with a torch. He angled for the school. Eliza stepped into the yard. This is a roof for learning, she called. Set that torch on my step and you'll explain it to every mother here and to the judge at sunup. He laughed and kicked on. Eliza raised the revolver, weighed the sky, then lowered it. Words first. She rang the bell once, then again, then held and let go. Neighbor, neighbor, storm. Doors opened. Men stepped into frames. Witnesses multiplied. The torch rider checked, reined, and veered toward the hotel. Eliza exhaled. Inside, pencils moved. Prissy wiped the board and wrote, Wisdom is justified. Down at the ford, the second wagon took water, shivered, then steadied. Silas stood in the river to the knees, left hand on a spoke. He thought of the violet and the leather heart, of a hinge that now opened without shame. By full dark, the last wagon climbed the bank toward Nanyehi's. Coulter clapped Silas once on the unhurt shoulder. Mercy earned its keep, he said. Silas nodded. Make dawn count. It will, Coulter said. A spit of rain swept the flats and passed. False fires died one by one. Eliza set the bar, banked the stove, and stood with her palm on the bell rope. The leather heart lay warm against her knuckles. Hooves dwindled, and night made space for sleep. Then a shout from the hotel. They've got the book! Boots pounded. Bragg's men, late and desperate, ran not for the bridge, not for the wagons, but for the church. Eliza looked at the window slit and felt the hour turn. Children, she said, steady, hands to laps. She lifted the bar. Pastor needs us. Night tightened as boots pounded for the church. Eliza lifted the bar, told the children, hands to laps, pray in your heads. To Prissy, if I ring once, then hold. Keep them seated. Prissy set her ribbon on the bell rope. Slate stretched across the threshold. Deputy Coulter rose from his chair by the hinge. Go, he told Eliza. I'll keep your door. Eliza crossed the cottonwoods, skirts wet, and slipped through the church's side door. Pastor Reed eased the iron box under the altar. From the front, Bragg shouldered in with 3 riders. Open it, he barked. The book burns tonight. Reed stood between them and the steps. You set match to God's table. You light your own sentence. Eliza set herself at the aisle's edge, where any shot would need her body first. "You want a stage?" she said. "You'll have one." She tugged the rope, one tap, then a hold. The bell rolled across the flats. Doors opened. Faces filled the entry, Judge Harlan last, ink on his fingers. "Mr. Bragg," Harlan said, steady as a plumb line. "We're done with alleys. Speak where light reaches." Bragg kept his smile thin. "A thief has turned this town soft. I came to reclaim private accounts." "Private accounts don't live under a cross," Harlan said. "Stand down!" One rider lunged for the rail. Slate hit his shin like a stone. The man swore. Coulter caught his wrist. "No iron," the deputy said. Silas slipped from the side door, mud to mid-shin, left hand on the pew. He took his place by the box like a hinge trued at last. "Judge," he said, "I surrender." "If he takes that ledger, names stay hungry." "They won't," Harlan said. Reed set the box on the table, turned both keys, and opened the lid. Church-stamped silver and the mended ledger lay plain. "Read," Eliza told Bragg. "Out loud." He didn't move. Coulter set the torn corner where it belonged. "Ada Finch, Mrs. Cobb, Nanyahi, columns neat as fence posts." Harlan tapped a date. "Coin left here," he said. "Your hand-signed receipt." "Your hand cut corners," Bragg barked a laugh. "Paper against muscle?" He jerked his chin. A rider grabbed a torch and flung it. Eliza dropped her shawl on the flame and pressed until the heat bit. Reed smothered what was left with a wet mop. Smoke stung. The ledger stayed unscorched, silver bright as rain. Coulter's pistol cleared leather. The room bent toward law without his firing. Bragg pivoted to fear. He snatched Prissy's little brother from a rear pew and shoved him forward. "Stand aside," he shouted, "or the child pays." Eliza felt the world narrow to a boy's collar and a bell rope in her hand. "Prissy," she said softly. She tapped once. The child hurt. The room answered without shouting. Ada's elder slid along pew backs. Mrs. Cobb let her iron pan fall. It clanged like a shot. Slate lunged for Bragg's boot. The boy twisted free. Coulter stepped in clean and wrenched Bragg's arm behind him. The torchbearer froze. Reed spoke one word, "Peace," and the air obeyed. Harlan removed his hat, then set it back. "Benjamin Bragg," he said, "you are under arrest for fraud upon the church, coercion, and incitement. You'll be tried in daylight." "Deputy," Coulter snapped cuffs. The metal sounded small and final. Silas swayed. Eliza steadied him. "Easy." The river and the lariat had taken more than warmth from him. Harlan closed the box and set his palm on it. "This stays under the altar till morning," he told the room. "Disputes come under oath." Eliza lifted her singed shawl. Holes peppered the hem. She folded it and set it beside the ledger, as if to say, "Bodies first, objects second, truth always." The bell drew one long breath as a draft found it. Outside, a wagon creaked toward Nanyehi's. Women followed with baskets. Names met sacks. The town began to trust itself. The bell rested. Reed bowed his head. "Keep us true," he prayed. "Amen," Harlan answered. Coulter hauled Bragg to the door. Eliza looked to Silas. "You can walk?" "I can." "Then back to the school," she said. "Dawn still owes us." They stepped into rain smell and quiet shouting. The church behind them held a box and a book. The school ahead held children who knew the code and had used it correctly. Between, the town stood chastened and awake. At the threshold, Prissy met them, eyes bright. "Wagons past Ada's, 2 sacks each," she whispered. Pastor counted names. "Good girl," Eliza said. She set the bar and faced the room. "Copy line 2, she told the class. Chalk began to whisper. "Wisdom is justified of her children." Silas lowered himself to the bench. Slate curled under his boot. Coulter took his chair by the hinge again. Harlan's silhouette moved toward the hotel, where a cell waited on a man who'd mistaken numbers for justice. Eliza set the deputy's star flat beside the Bible and the violet. The leather heart tapped the bell rope. Night settled. Breathe, she told the room. Dawn is on our side if we carry it there. Dawn arrived clean and cold, the kind that makes smoke draw straight and every sound earned. Eliza rang the bell twice, neighbor, and once hold, so mothers gathered but did not flood the room. Judge Harlan came with ink on his fingers. Deputy Coulter took his chair by the hinge. Pastor Reed stood near the door with the old rope looped in his palm. Report, Harlan said. Wagons to Ada, to Mrs. Cobb, to Nanyahi, Eliza answered. Names match to Sachs, Reed nodded. Coulter added, Bragg sits under lock. Ledger intact. Harlan set a single sheet on the desk and smoothed it. Then we finish what night began. He faced Silas. You took without warrant and returned what was stolen. You bled in the giving back. You brought proof and names. The court weighs these together. The room drew still. Children held their slates like shields they had outgrown. Time served to sunset, Harlan said. Silas March will testify when the circuit returns. He remains under the deputy's keeping until then, free to work and report. Foreman Bragg is bound for trial. Church silver, church's keeping. A breath moved the room, soft and human. Eliza did not smile. She let herself believe. Silas bowed his head. Yes, Judge. Do right in daylight, Harlan said. Mercy is not forgetfulness. It's a weight the honest choose to carry. I'll carry it, Silas answered. Coulter rose. Doorstays watched a while. But we'll live like a town, not a fort. He tipped his hat toward Eliza, a salute that admitted debt without making a speech. Children slipped into chatter. Prissy lifted the bell rope so it tapped the small leather heart. Miss Hart, she whispered, do we copy the proverb again? Once more, Eliza said, warm. Neat as Sunday, Chalk whispered. Wisdom is justified of her children. Reed walked back to the church with the iron box, women at his shoulders like deacons of bread. Wagons emptied, turned to chores. Someone drove a straight nail into a crooked board, and the sound felt like amen. Eliza brewed coffee that tasted of victory and grit. She poured a cup for Coulter, one for Reed when he returned and one for Silas. School's in, she said. Tables and letters. They recited nines and read a psalm, not to show piety but to teach breath after fear. Slate snored through half of it like a small gray stove. When the lessons dismissed for noon, Harlan paused at the threshold. Mrs. Hart, he said, this town owes you steadiness. It owes bread to the hungry, she replied. I only rang. You rang at the right time, he said, and went to write the warrants that make talk hold. Eliza found Silas mending the second hinge with left-handed patience. He worked the screws until the door settled and sighed. You don't owe me, she said. I owe the world a true line, he said. This is a piece of it. He cut another small heart from leather thinner than the first, and pressed a slot into it with his thumbnail. For your shelf, he said. She tied it with a blue thread from the mending box and set it beside the violet, the star, and the Bible. The four made a square that felt like a map you could live by. Outside, wheels clattered and stopped. Ada Finch stepped in with a loaf wrapped in cloth. For the teacher, she said, and then shy, and for the man who brought back what was ours. Silas looked toward Eliza. She answered with a nod. Take, because taking can be holy when it honors return. He broke the bread and split it 5 ways, counting the children near enough to smell it. The afternoon softened. Work returned the world to itself. Coulter rode a slow circuit past the window and did not stop. Harlan's pen scratched across paper in the office beyond the square. As the sun bent toward evening, Eliza stood the violet up straighter. She set the deputy's star flat beside the Bible so their edges met. She looped the ribboned heart where hands reach by habit. She opened the door and stepped onto the porch. Far off, the river ran the color of old silver. Nearer, the schoolyard held shadows of children like sums chalked faint and correct. Silas leaned in the doorway, shoulder easy, bandage clean. He looked at the bell rope, then at her. "If you ever ring once and then my name," he said, plain, "I'll come, wherever I am." "I expect you will," she said. "But I hope to need only neighbor and storm." He smiled, the spare kind that keeps. "We'll keep the rest for Sundays." Evening cooled. Stars pricked up early. She sat on the step. Slate put his head on her boot and sighed. Eliza watched the flats take on peace without forgetting cost. Tomorrow would bring more sums, more mending, habit, and mercy in alternating rows. For now the hinge held. The bell hung true. The ledger spoke honestly, and the town kept learning the arithmetic that saves. "Class dismissed," she said to the quiet, and the quiet agreed. Want more clean Western romance? Subscribe now and turn on notifications.